She was shoved into the mud by a teacher, but a millionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe. To my channel, I promise to make your day better with my videos. The morning sun beat down hard on the playground of Willow Creek Elementary when Juniper June Bellamy, just 4 years old, happily ran towards the small, rusty swing set. Her worn sneakers made wet slapping noises with each step on the ground, still damp from the previous night's rain, and her faded little outfit contrasted sharply with the pristine clothes of the other kids. Prescott Sterling was adjusting the papers on his desk on the second floor of the Sterling Enterprises building when the movement in the schoolyard caught his eye. At 52, the real estate developer had grown accustomed to the daily view, children playing during recess at the elementary school directly across from his office. But on that Tuesday morning, something different was about to unfold. June was trying to climb onto the slide when she tripped and fell to her knees in the mud. Her small hands became soiled as she tried to get up, and tiny tears welled up in her hazel eyes. It was then that Dolores Lola Vargas, the 38-year-old preschool teacher, approached with firm steps and a disapproving look. "Look at what you've done, you filthy child," Lola snapped, grabbing June's arm with unnecessary force. "You always have to embarrass our school with your deplorable appearance." What happened next left Prescott paralyzed. Lola violently shoved the girl, causing June to fall backward into the deepest mud puddle in the yard. The sound of the small body hitting the wet ground echoed up to the window where Prescott watched, incredulous. "Now you're just the way you deserve to be," Lola sneered, turning her back on the child who was crying desperately, covered in mud from head to toe. "You can stay there until you learn to behave yourself." June remained there, sitting in the cold mud, while the other children watched her with a mixture of fear and pity. None dared to approach and help her. They all knew that confronting Mrs. Vargas meant becoming the next target of her rage. Prescott descended the stairs of the Sterling Enterprises building 2 steps at a time, indignation burning in his chest like fire. He had lost his only daughter, Savannah, in a car accident 3 years prior, and since then he avoided any situation that reminded him of the pain of seeing a child suffer. But what he had just witnessed crossed all his limits. When he arrived at the school gate, June was still sitting in the mud, shivering from cold and humiliation. Her dark brown hair clung to her face, wet with tears, and her already meager clothes were now completely ruined. "Excuse me," Prescott said to the front desk staff. "I need to speak with the principal urgently." Principal Beverly, Bev Hanson, who had been head of the school for 15 years, received Prescott in her office with a polite smile that quickly faded when he recounted what he had witnessed. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," Bev said, nervously, shuffling the papers on her desk. "Mrs. Vargas is one of our most experienced teachers. Perhaps the child fell on her own, and—" "I saw everything from my window," Prescott interrupted, his voice trembling with contained rage. "That woman deliberately shoved a 4-year-old child into the mud. It's unacceptable." Bev sighed deeply. She knew all about Mrs. Vargas's methods, but the teacher had important political connections in the town and had secured federal funding for the school in recent years. Firing her would be problematic. "I'll talk to Mrs. Vargas," she said finally, "but you need to understand that we deal with children from different social backgrounds. Sometimes it's necessary to be firmer." Prescott's blood boiled. "Firmer? That was pure violence. How can you treat a child like that?" At that moment, Lola Vargas entered the room without knocking, her face still red with anger. "Principal Hanson, is there a problem? I heard raised voices." "This is Mr. Prescott Sterling," Bev said. "He witnessed the incident with student Juniper Bellamy." Lola crossed her arms and stared at Prescott with disdain. "Oh, yes, the businessman who spends his day watching children from the window. How very interesting." The venomous insinuation hit Prescott like a slap. "How dare you suggest something like that? I'm reporting an act of violence against a child." "Violence," Lola scoffed. "That girl is a lost cause. She comes here dirty, stinking, without school supplies. She's an embarrassment to our institution. If you really cared about her, you'd talk to her family about basic hygiene." Prescott left the school with a heavy heart and a steely determination growing in his chest. He needed to learn more about Juniper's situation and find a way to help her. He wouldn't allow that child to continue suffering while he had the power to intervene. That afternoon he discovered where June lived, a simple bungalow on the outskirts of town, where she lived with her grandmother, Beatrice B. Bellamy, who was 67 years old. The elderly woman survived by collecting recyclable materials from the streets, pushing an improvised cart, even with her hands deformed by severe arthritis. When Prescott knocked on the door of that humble house, he had no idea that his life was about to transform completely, nor that his attempt to help an innocent child would unleash a silent war that threatened to destroy everything he had built over decades of hard work. B. Bellamy opened the peeling wooden door with difficulty, her arthritic hands trembling as she gripped the doorknob. At 67, each movement was a struggle against the pain that consumed her swollen joints. Her tired eyes widened when she saw the well-dressed man standing on her doorstep. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Prescott said, respectfully removing his hat. "My name is Prescott Sterling. I'd like to talk about your granddaughter, Juniper." B's wrinkled face contracted with worry. "Did my little girl do something wrong at school? She's a good girl, I swear to God." "No, ma'am. Actually, I came here because I witnessed something terrible happen to her," Prescott explained, noticing the elderly woman's patched-up clothes and the smell of dampness coming from inside the house. B invited him in, embarrassed by the simplicity of her home. The small living room had only an old sofa with exposed springs, an old television, and a crucifix on the wall. In the corner, piles of plastic bottles and cardboard awaited being sold at the scrapyard. June was sitting on the floor, still in her muddy clothes, playing with dolls made of scraps of fabric and duct tape. When she saw Prescott, she hid behind her grandmother's legs, her big eyes full of shyness. "What happened to my little girl?" Bea asked, her hands trembling as she offered a glass of water to the visitor. Prescott recounted the incident at the school, watching the horror grow on the elderly woman's face. Bea sat down heavily on the sofa, tears streaming down her lined cheeks. "I knew something was wrong," she murmured. "June has been coming. Home quieter, sometimes crying, but she always said she'd fallen on her own. My God, what can I do? I don't have the money to transfer her to another school." "Can you tell me how Juniper came to be under your care?" Prescott asked gently. Bea sighed deeply. "My son Caleb and his wife left when June was only 6 months old. They said they were going to try to make a living in California, but we never heard from them again. They left the girl with me and disappeared. Since then, it's just me and her against the world." The situation was worse than Prescott had imagined. Bea survived on a minimum wage pension and the little she managed to earn selling recyclable materials. Her hands, deformed by arthritis, could barely hold heavy objects, but she continued to go out every morning with her cart, determined not to let her granddaughter go hungry. "I have diabetes too," Bea confessed, showing the insulin injection marks on her thin arms. "The medicine is expensive. Sometimes I go without taking it to be able to buy food for June. I know she goes to school in old and dirty clothes, but it's what I have to offer." Prescott felt a lump in his throat. That courageous grandmother was sacrificing herself completely for her granddaughter, but her physical and financial limitations made the situation unsustainable. "Mrs. Bellamy, I'd like to help you," he said, taking his wallet from his pocket. "I can cover new clothes for June, school supplies, maybe even help with your medical expenses." Bee's eyes filled with tears of gratitude, but also distrust. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." Prescott looked at June, who continued playing silently on the floor, and saw for a moment the face of his own daughter. "Because every child deserves to have a chance in life, and because I see that you're a woman of character who is doing the impossible to take care of your granddaughter." That same afternoon, Prescott took June and Bee to buy new clothes and shoes. The shy smile that blossomed on the girl's face when she saw herself in the mirror, wearing a clean dress and shoes that fit perfectly, warmed Prescott's cold heart in a way he hadn't felt in years. But the next day, when June arrived at school in her new clothes, Mrs. Vargas greeted her with an even angrier look. "Look at that," the teacher said loudly so that all the other children could hear. "Now the little beggar is pretending to be rich. But new clothes don't change what you are on the inside, dirty and inferior to the other children." The words cut June like knives. She lowered her head, ashamed, while some children laughed nervously. All day long, Mrs. Vargas found subtle ways to humiliate her. She made her sit alone at recess, didn't call on her to participate in activities, and muttered mean comments whenever she passed near her. When Prescott appeared at the school in the late afternoon to pick up June, Mrs. Vargas was waiting for him at the gate with a venomous smile. "Mr. Sterling," she said loudly so that other parents could hear, "what a coincidence that you always show up here at dismissal time. And yesterday I saw you taking the girl shopping. How interesting. All this attention with a child who isn't your family." The insinuating tone was clear, and Prescott felt the faces of other parents turning toward him with curiosity and suspicion. Some mothers whispered to each other, casting distrustful glances in his direction. "I'm just helping a family in need," Prescott replied, keeping his voice calm despite the rage that boiled inside him. "Sure," Lola laughed, "a rich, single man who has so much interest in a poor little girl. What inexplicable kindness." That night, Prescott received the first call. It was Randolph "Randy" McMillan, his minority partner in the Sterling Enterprises. "Prescott, there are some strange rumors circulating about you around town. Something about a child at the school. I think you'd better be careful." "It's lies, Randy. I'm just helping a needy family." "I believe you, but you know how people are around here. Gossip spreads like wildfire in a small town." Prescott hung up the phone with a dark premonition. Mrs. Vargas wasn't just mistreating June, she was starting a campaign to destroy his reputation. And in a small town like that, where everyone knew each other and gossip traveled faster than the truth, he knew he was entering a battle far more dangerous than he had imagined. In the humble bungalow on the outskirts of town, Bee put June to sleep, noticing that the girl was quieter than usual. When she asked about her day at school, June just mumbled that everything was fine. But her sad little eyes told a different story. While the girl slept, Bee sat in the small kitchen and took her insulin with trembling hands. The diabetes was getting worse, and she felt constant pain in her joints. Prescott seemed like a good man, but she was beginning to wonder if accepting his help would bring even bigger problems for her granddaughter. The shrill ringing of the telephone echoed through Prescott's office at 7 in the morning. On the other end of the line, the tense voice of Mayor Walter "Walt" Jenkins carried a coldness he had never heard before. "Prescott, I need to talk to you urgently. Come to my office now." 30 minutes later, Prescott found himself before Walt, who avoided his gaze while nervously shuffling the papers on his desk. Beside him sat Reverend Theodore Ted Franklin, the town's pastor, and Dr. Evelyn Eve Harding, a respected pediatrician in the region. "Prescott," Walt began, his voice grave, "we've received some concerning reports about your behavior with a child at the elementary school." What kind of reports? Prescott asked, already feeling his stomach churning. Reverend Ted leaned forward. Son, we know you've been through difficult times after losing Savannah. Sometimes grief can make us act in inappropriate ways. Inappropriate how? Prescott's voice was icy. Dr. Eve flipped through some papers. We have information that you've been approaching a 4-year-old girl, taking her shopping, offering her expensive gifts. This raises questions about your motivations. Prescott felt the world collapsing. I'm helping a family in extreme need. The child's grandmother is sick. They live in poverty. And why specifically this child? Walt pressed. Why didn't you seek out appropriate institutions? Why the direct, intimate contact? Because I witnessed the teacher assaulting the girl, Prescott exploded. I came to you expecting support to report a case of child abuse, and instead, I find myself being accused of God knows what. The three exchanged uncomfortable glances. Reverend Ted sighed deeply. Prescott, Mrs. Vargas contacted our parish yesterday. She's very worried about this situation. According to her, you've been pressuring the school, threatening employees, and creating a hostile environment. That's a lie. She also informed us, continued Dr. Eve, that the child has been arriving at school with expensive clothes, new toys, and that this is causing imbalance in the school environment. Other children are questioning why June is receiving special treatment from a strange man. Walt picked up a folder and opened it. Prescott, because of these allegations, the board of the Chamber of Commerce has decided to temporarily suspend you from your position as vice president until this situation is clarified. The blow was brutal. Prescott had worked 15 years to reach that position, which gave him prestige and important business connections. You're destroying my reputation based on gossip from a teacher who mistreats children, he shouted, rising abruptly. Prescott, said Reverend Ted with false gentleness, perhaps it's best if you distance yourself from this family for a while. Let the proper authorities handle the situation. Prescott left feeling like he had been beaten. On the street, he noticed the curious glances and whispers from the shopkeepers. The news had already spread through the small town like wildfire. That afternoon, when he went to pick up June from school, he found the girl sitting alone in the yard, whimpering softly. Other children played far away from her, as if she had some contagious disease. What happened, honey? Prescott asked, crouching down to her level. Mrs. Vargas told the other children that I'm dangerous, June mumbled, her tears making small streaks in the dirt on her face. She said that I have a bad man who gives me presents and that the other girls can't play with me. Prescott felt a murderous rage rising in his throat. Vargas was using the children themselves as weapons in her dirty war. Uncle Prescott, June said, tugging on his sleeve. Why doesn't Mrs. Vargas like me? What did I do wrong? Prescott's heart broke. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that she was being punished simply for existing, for being born poor, for having someone who cared about her? That night the situation worsened dramatically. Bea greeted him at home, with eyes red from crying. Mr. Sterling, our neighbor, Bernice Fuller, came by today. She said that the whole neighborhood is talking about how you're a dangerous man, that you could harm June. Mrs. Bellamy, do you believe that? The elderly woman shook her head vigorously. Of course not. You've only treated us with kindness. But people are saying horrible things, that they're going to call the police, that they're going to take June away from me. No one's going to take June away from you, Prescott said, but his voice didn't sound very convincing even to himself. Maybe it's best if you stop visiting us for a while, Bea murmured, the words coming out like daggers. I don't want my little girl to get hurt because of me. Prescott sat down heavily in the old chair. Vargas had achieved what she wanted. To completely isolate him from June, making even the girl's grandmother afraid to accept his help. The next day, the situation got even worse. Garrett Dawson, his main coffee bean supplier, called to cancel the supply contract. "Prescott, you know we've always had a solid partnership, but my wife is worried about these stories that are circulating. She doesn't want our company to be associated with, well, you understand." One after another, the calls kept coming. Suppliers cancelling contracts, customers postponing orders, business partners re-evaluating their business relationships. In a matter of 2 weeks, Prescott's company was facing its biggest financial crisis in decades. Randy McMillan appeared in his office with a somber expression. "Prescott, I need to tell you something. Mrs. Vargas approached my wife at church. She said that you've been trying to bribe school employees, that you're harassing children." My Bernice was terrified. "And you believe that?" "Of course not. But the situation is getting out of control. The rumors are spreading throughout the region. Customers from other cities are canceling orders." That afternoon, Prescott decided to confront Vargas directly. He found her at the school, talking to a group of parents at the gate. "Mrs. Vargas, I need to speak with you." The parents immediately moved away, as if he were carrying some plague. Vargas smiled with venomous satisfaction. "Mr. Sterling, how nice to see you. How's business? I heard it hasn't been doing very well lately." "You know exactly what you're doing," Prescott said, his voice low and controlled. "You're spreading lies about me around town." "Lies?" Vargas feigned indignation. "I'm just protecting the children at my school. A strange man who spends his day watching girls from the window, who offers expensive gifts to vulnerable children. Any responsible educator would be concerned. You're destroying the life of an innocent child." "June is doing just fine, thank you. In fact, ever since a certain someone stopped interfering in her education, she's been behaving much better. She's learning her place." The coldness in Vargas's words made Prescott understand a terrible truth. That woman wasn't just protecting her position or reacting to a threat. She derived pleasure from causing suffering, both in June and in him. She was a predator who had found the perfect victims. When Prescott arrived home that night, he found a letter under his door. On it was written in block letters, "Pedophile, get out of our town." For the first time since he had decided to help June, Prescott wondered if he hadn't made the biggest mistake of his life. 3 months had passed since Prescott had been forced to distance himself from June. His company was on the verge of bankruptcy. He had lost most of his friends, and the streets of the town that had once respected him now offered him only looks of contempt and malicious whispers. On that rainy Friday morning, Prescott was in his empty office, signing papers to lay off more employees, when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Sterling, this is Odessa Merrill. I was a teacher in this town for 40 years. I need to speak with you urgently." Prescott knew Odessa by name, a respected educator who had retired 5 years ago. At 73, she was still fondly remembered by generations of former students. "You can come to my office now," he said, her voice trembling with urgency. "I've discovered something you need to know about Dolores Vargas." An hour later, Odessa was sitting before Prescott, her elderly hands trembling as she held a yellowed folder. "Mr. Sterling, I was Vargas's mentor when she started teaching 15 years ago. I always noticed something strange about her, but I could never prove it, until now." Odessa opened the folder and took out several documents. "I started investigating after I heard the rumors about you. Something wasn't right. Vargas has always been aggressive with poor students, but in recent years it's gotten much worse. What did you discover?" "First, I found this." Odessa showed a birth certificate. Dolores Vargas wasn't born in West Virginia like she always said. She came from Alabama, where she was expelled from 2 schools for mistreating students. Prescott examined the document, his heart racing. But that's not the worst, continued Odessa. I got in touch with a former colleague of hers from Mobile. Vargas was fired from there for forging diplomas. She never graduated in education. The world stopped for Prescott. What do you mean? The diploma she presented here is fake. She got the job by bribing the former principal, who was involved in embezzling school lunch funds. When he retired, Vargas maintained her position by blackmailing other people who knew about the scheme. Odessa took more papers out of the folder. I investigated the school's bids over the past 5 years. Vargas has been embezzling money from the school lunch program, selling the food to third parties and leaving the needy children without adequate nutrition. I got these fake invoices from the school's trash. Prescott analyzed the documents. With growing indignation, why didn't you report this before? Because Vargas is protected by City Councillor Arnold Baines and the county superintendent. They receive a percentage of the embezzled money. It's a corruption network that has controlled the city's education for years. At that moment, the office door opened, and in came Dexter "Dex" Shaw, a 45-year-old man looking like a journalist, notepad in hand and recorder in his pocket. "Excuse me," he said. "I'm Dexter Shaw, an investigative journalist from the Regional Gazette. I'm investigating irregularities in the school district, and I overheard your conversation. Can I join you?" Odessa and Prescott exchanged glances. "How did you know we were here?" Prescott asked. "I've been investigating the corruption scheme in education for months. I discovered that Vargas is a central figure in a network that embezzles federal funds. When I learned that she was persecuting you, I realized that I had found someone who might have valuable information." Dexter sat down and opened his notepad. "Gentlemen, what I've discovered goes beyond embezzlement of school lunch funds. Vargas, along with local politicians, created a shell corporation that supplies overpriced educational materials to schools in the region. They've billed over $2 million in the last 3 years. "My God," murmured Odessa. "And there's more," Dexter continued. "Vargas not only falsified her diplomas, she assumes different identities in nearby towns, applying the same scam. She's a professional criminal." Prescott felt a mixture of relief and fury. "She ruined my life to protect this scheme." "Exactly," said Dexter. "When you tried to report the mistreatment of June, Vargas realized that she was at risk of being exposed, so she decided to destroy your credibility before you could investigate more deeply." Odessa took Prescott's hand. "Mr. Sterling, while you were suffering these unjust accusations, I was observing what was happening to June at school. Her situation worsened dramatically." "How so?" "Vargas intensified the mistreatment. The girl no longer speaks at school, refuses to eat, and I've seen her several times with bruises on her arms. Yesterday, June fainted during recess. Prescott's blood ran cold. Where is she now? B took her to the clinic. The poor woman is desperate. Her diabetes has gotten much worse with the stress, and she can barely work anymore." Dexter closed his notebook with determination. "Gentlemen, I have enough evidence to expose this entire corruption network, but I need your help to protect June and ensure that Vargas is removed immediately." That afternoon, the three went to Bay's house. They found the elderly woman on the kitchen floor, passed out, with June sitting beside her, crying and trying to wake her up. "Grandma won't wake up Uncle Prescott," June cried when she saw him running into his arms. Dexter called an ambulance while Prescott cared for June. The girl was visibly malnourished and had marks of violence on her body. Her eyes, once bright and curious, were now dimmed by suffering. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed that B had gone into a diabetic coma. Her condition was serious, the result of months without adequate medication and extreme stress. "She may not make it," said the doctor. "Her system is very weak." June clung to Prescott, trembling with fear. "Uncle Prescott, is Grandma going to be okay?" At that moment, looking at the fragile child in his arms and at the courageous elderly woman fighting for her life in a hospital bed, Prescott made a decision that would change everything. "Dexter," he said, "publish everything. Expose Vargas and everyone involved. I don't care about the consequences anymore." The following Monday, the headline of the regional gazette screamed, "Corruption Network in School District Embezzled Millions." Dexter's article, with photos of the fake documents and testimony from Odessa, caused an earthquake in the town. Vargas was arrested at the school in front of all the students and teachers. City Councillor Arnold Baines and the county superintendent were also detained. In a matter of hours, the entire corruption network collapsed. Bev Hansen, the principal who had protected Vargas out of fear, sought out Prescott at the hospital. "Mr. Sterling," she said, crying, "I beg your forgiveness. I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid of losing my job. Vargas threatened me constantly." The entire town, which had condemned Prescott based on lies, now turned against those who had orchestrated his persecution. Reverend Ted, Walt Jenkins, and Dr. Eve came in person to apologize. "Prescott," said Walt, visibly ashamed, "we want to immediately reinstate you to the Chamber of Commerce, and we'll launch a campaign to get your suppliers to work with you again." But the biggest victory came a week later, when Bee woke up from the coma. Her first eyes searched for June, who was sleeping in a chair beside the bed, holding her grandmother's hand. "My little girl," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma!" June cried, waking up and throwing herself into the elderly woman's frail arms. With Vargas gone and a new teacher in charge of June's class, Winona Winnie Campbell, a gentle and experienced educator, the girl began to recover gradually. Prescott covered psychological treatment for her and specialized medical care for Bee. Months later, while watching June draw colorful birds on a piece of paper, no longer with charcoal on the walls, but with new colored pencils, Prescott reflected on the entire journey. He had lost much: money, friends, reputation, but he had gained something infinitely more valuable: a family. Bee treated him like a son, and June had found in him not only a protector, but someone who believed in her potential when no one else did. "Uncle Prescott," June said, showing her drawing. "Look, I drew you, me, and Grandma flying together with the birds." Prescott smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Sometimes fighting for what is right is costly, but some battles are worth all the losses, especially when the prize is the smile of a child who has come to believe that the world can be a good place again. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.